For more, we're joined by Barbara Finamore, senior attorney at the Natural Resources Defense Council. Good to see you. Welcome to the show. Let me start with China's dependency on coal. There's been some controversy here whether or not it's too much or too little. I want to start with that with you.
Coal was responsible for powering China's economic miracle. It is responsible for about 2/3 of China's primary energy and about 80% of its electricity. But it's also responsible for about 50 to 60% of the most damaging form of air pollution in China that is hitting us even as we speak. And also, coal is responsible for about 80% of China's CO2 emissions.
So that doesn't sound very good. And I just talked about how they're trying to cut that down and they're building 150 new coal-fired plants. I'm going to assume that the new ones are at least better than the old ones, right?
The new plants are more efficient than the old plants, but also we're finding that they're not being used very much. Some people say that China is building one new idle coal plant a week. And the reason is that China also leads the world in wind power and solar power. And it has a target announced at the Paris climate negotiations of meeting 1/5 of its total electric needs through non-fossil energy by 2030. And the cost of solar and wind is coming down dramatically thanks to China's economies of scale.
Okay, so that's good news, right? We got the wind, we got the solar, but even though it's still, let's be honest, a small part of the overall grid of energy. Let me just finish up with coal for one last moment here. There are some people saying that China burns more coal than they actually do. I just want to get your expert opinion. Do you think that's true, and is that relevant?
China did a very deep dive through a national economic census in 2013, and it did find that when it looked down below the county level for the first time, it was burning a lot more coal during the period 2000 to 2012. About 9.5% more carbon emissions than it had estimated during that time period. But that doesn't overshadow the fact that in 2014, coal use was essentially flat, and it has been dropping steadily this year.
Okay, so that's good. So we just talked about the solar, we talked about the wind, all these things. Is that going to help China? They're saying the peak will be 2030, and I guess my question is, I don't see why the peak couldn't be sooner, because after all, they make the vast majority of the world's solar panels and equipment for wind anyways, right?
Yes, we think that China can peak its CO2 emissions a lot earlier than 2030 with a concerted effort, including a national cap on coal consumption, which many Chinese experts have recommended that China include in its new 5-year plan that's coming up. This could allow China to reduce the amount of coal in its primary energy use to 58%. From the current 66%, and could also help it peak its CO2 emissions by 2025 or even earlier.
Barbara, one last thing, this carbon market that we often hear about, that we talk about, none of us are experts at this. So explain to us how that would work, the carbon market, and how that would ultimately help China or any other country for that matter.
China has been experimenting with putting a price on carbon in 8 different provinces and city pilot projects. The president of China announced that starting in 2017, it will launch a national carbon market. Building on those pilots, this will be the largest carbon market in the world. It will cover every major source of CO2 emissions, all the key industrial sectors. And it will require each factory, for example, that burns carbon to obtain allowances for each ton of carbon that it emits and to pay for that. So this is going to put a price on carbon that will help to drive down the cost of the clean energy technologies and provide a level playing field. A lot of the details remain to be worked out, but they are working on them and also putting in place a much more robust system for monitoring, reporting, and verifying its greenhouse gas emissions from every key industrial sector.
I was just going to say, you already brought it up. I think that's probably the toughest job of all is just monitoring, and ultimately, I guess someone has to verify that this is all happening. Barbara, good to see you. Thank you very much for helping us with this very important topic.